I made several top 10 ranking videos in the past, but I realized, why just 10? Why not rank every Bond girl or villain or the henchman, the pre-title sequences, and so on, just like I did with my ranking of all the Bond films. So, since I am currently busy remaking and upgrading my in-depth Bond film reviews, the Recapping 007 series, I figured my Ranking 007 series needed comprehensive remakes as well, starting with ranking every main Bond girl, worst to best.
Come in. Come in.
What's your name?
Sure me.
Really?
Pussy. Paula Ivanova.
Hi, I'm Plenty.
Well, of course you are.
And this is Miss Penelope Smallbone, my new assistant.
It's a very pretty name.
Good night.
She's just coming, sir. I thought Christmas only comes once a year.
I'm Mr. Arlington Beach, professional gambler, and you're Miss Stephanie Broadchest here.
I am not.
You're gonna have to trust me on this.
That's my little octopusy.
Ah, the world of 007. A world filled with gadgets, cars, exotic locations, and gorgeous women. The latter on which we're going to be focusing in this video.
This might take some time.
Just a few disclaimers as of how this ranking is going to work. This video ranks all main Bond girls of the films, and while their level of beauty or hotness certainly plays a part in favoring certain Bond girls among the fandom, for this video I mostly looked at the actual characters and what they meant for the Bond series. Also, for every film it is pretty obvious who the main Bond girls are, but with the Craig films it got complicated. Madeline is the only one to be the main Bond girl to 2 films, and Skyfall technically does not have a main Bond girl. You could argue M takes the center stage there, but I feel Severin, though not in the traditional sense, could still be classified as the Bond girl of that film. So I just took a liberty there and chose her as the Skyfall entry. And, much like my ranking of the films, Never Say Never Again is going to be included again. So, let's kick this off. The negative stereotype surrounding Bond girls is that they are often brainless bimbos that are mostly window dressing in the Bond films, end up being damsels in distress with very little resourcefulness of their own. While as a Bond fan, I obviously oppose that generalization, as the overwhelming majority of Bond girls clearly are the opposite. But I have a hard time defending this when it comes to Stacey Sutton in A View to a Kill. Tanya Roberts was easy on the eyes and started off with quite a sassy and promising introduction.
Oh, by the way, you didn't say what part of the state you come from, Miss...
No, I didn't.
But, as was the case with another American Bond girl showing up in this ranking quite soon, most of that intrigue was quickly flushed down the toilet midway through the movie, with the annoying helpless screaming being a key kickstarter.
Help me! Jane! Jane!
It just goes straight through your core, hitting every nerve. Fans often point to Denise Richards being unconvincing as a nuclear physicist, but take a look at Tanya Roberts as a geologist.
These lead straight into this section of the San Andreas Fault. Zoran just has to blast through the bottom of these lakes to flood the fault.
Except right beneath us is the key geological lock that keeps the faults from moving at once.
I really don't buy that she understands any of what she is saying here, and the fact that her character does not notice a zeppelin sneaking up on her does not help her case against the stereotype either. these are just some of the key issues I have with her character and why she ranks as my least favorite Bond girl.
Keep leaning on that tutor, Charlie, and you're gonna get a shot in the mouth.
Yes, the similar American Bond girl character I just referred to. Tiffany Case suffers from the same problem I had with Stacey Sutton, being introduced as an intriguing partner to Bond with a lot of sassiness and seeming resourcefulness. I really liked her introduction scene actually. It almost makes it seem like she is going to be a promising character. But then of course, we all know that quickly sinks as the movie progresses.
Shoot him!
Unlike Stacey Sutton, I think her character was intended to provide some comedy and of course eye candy near the end, walking around in a bikini for no real reason. And while Jill St. John did turn in a performance that portrayed both her sassiness early on and comedic blundering later on in a convincing way, I don't like how she was set up being so much more than where they ended up taking the character in the end. Especially when you consider that Tiffany Case in the novel was one of the more interesting female characters Fleming brought to the page.
Good night, what a pleasant surprise.
My hard to get at didn't last very long, did it?
Another Bond girl that you would have a hard time defending against that stereotype would be Mary Goodnight. She is one of the many secret agent Bond girls, but is clearly the least competent one fitting that mold. Getting caught easily, becoming a damsel in distress, being more of a nuisance to Bond than providing any meaningful support, and walking around in a bikini throughout the climax, again, just because, makes her fit that stereotype arguably the best. Granted though, none of what I just mentioned can really be blamed on Britt Ekland as an actress, but rather on the way her character was written. She served more as the comedy relief of the film, and in some scenes that did work well. If anything, at least Britt Ekland seemed to have a lot of fun portraying the character and embrace the comedy side with full dedication. But I like to take my main Bond girls seriously. That doesn't mean I can't appreciate some humor here and there, but I'm simply not too much of a fan of the intentional dumb blonde character that she was written as, making her, to me, one of the weaker Bond girls.
And that's where we have to go next. Do you think you can make it?
Of course. It's business.
Good.
Another female secret agent that also ends up walking in the villain's lair in a bikini is in Kissy Suzuki. She is neither incompetent or a bimbo or a comedy relief like any of the Bond girls I ranked below her, but the problem I have with her character is her very limited screen time. She shows up near the end of the film, serving mostly as just a replacement of Aki. And honestly, she really seemed to have just been introduced because Bond needed to be able to bang someone else at the end of the film. To me, it would have been way more interesting if they never sacrificed Aki and just kept her as the only Bond girl of the film, because I feel Akiko Wakabayashi was more engaging than Miyahama, had better chemistry with Connery, and served the role of a Japanese secret agent well. I would almost argue that Aki was the main Bond girl of You Only Live Twice because she had more screen time and was more meaningful throughout. The only reason we collectively agree that Kissy is the main Bond girl is because Bond ends the movie with her. Again, there is nothing inherently wrong with Kissy as a character. She was just underdeveloped and therefore redundant in a film where she was overshadowed by an almost identical character who did it better.
You have slight lesions in the upper vertebrae.
The domino of Never Say Never Again fits in neatly above 4 of the Eon Bond girls for me. Kim Basinger had the disadvantage of starring in a remake in a role of a character we already saw established by Claudine Auger, and I think she is not nearly as exotic as the original. That's usually a quality American Bond girls seem to lack for me, which is why I think she's just slightly miscast for a character with an Italian last name. Maybe she would have been better in a Diamonds Are Forever remake as Tiffany Case. She's not just a damsel or a bimbo like some lower on the list though. They tried to give her more of a personality with a far different relationship to her Largo and giving her a passion for dancing. And she of course also got that ending of killing the main villain just like the original, but unlike the femme fatale in the same film, Fatima Blush, Basinger did not really stand out for me and wasn't memorable.
I'm looking for Dr. Goodhead.
You just found her.
A woman?
Probably my first controversial pick in the eyes of some fans, as I think she is often ranked a lot higher in other people's lists. Lois Giles always looked more like the average loving house mom next door to me. It's like you expect her to pick up the kids from school at any moment, instead of being a killer secret agent. Also, I find the delivery of her lines particularly emotionless in a lot of places.
Hang on, James.
So, she never really convinced me as a great Bond girl. She does have a mature appearance that seems to fit Roger's Bond, and I can easily believe she would have the intelligence her character portrays. So by all means do I believe we broke away from the stereotype already at this point of the ranking, but she just never won me over as a Bond girl that stands out. Halle Berry as Jinx often gets criticized for her terrible dialogue in the film.
Who sent you?
Your mama. And she told me to tell you she's really disappointed in you.
Which is absolutely true. But I think the issue was also present with most of the dialogue Brosnan and Toby Stephens got. So the blame is certainly in the writing of Die Another Day. I also critique Halle Berry's acting in a lot of instances in the film. For an Oscar-winning actress, Jinx was not one of the prime examples of her top performances. But somehow I never disliked her character. For one, I find her an extremely memorable Bond girl. Say what you want about her, but ask any casual fan who knows very little about the Bond films, who do you remember as a Bond girl? In my experience, they will often say, oh, wasn't Halle Berry in one of them once? I mean, it has to count for something she meant for the series. Out of all these secret agent equal to Bond type of Bond girls, I do think she has an aura around her to be believable enough. She does have some badass moments in the film that I like, and she is sexy at the same time. She certainly is not one of the all-time greats in the series, but I think she easily wins out on all of the Bond girls I rank below her. Believe it or not, this already marked the threshold in the ranking of the Bond girls I actually like.
Miss...
Dr. Jones. Christmas Jones. And don't make any jokes, I've heard them all.
I don't know any doctor jokes.
Denise Richards is among the most disliked Bond girls in the series. We get it, it's Denise Richards and she is so opposite of a nuclear physicist. But much like Jinx before her, I could just not bring myself to actively dislike her. I think she did her best with the role she was given, and she probably has a sour taste from all the fans lashing out over her performance throughout the years. But she did bring a certain attraction a Bond girl should have and embrace that. You know how boys in their early teens often discover their manhood first seeing a Bond girl? I was 9 when The World Is Not Enough came out, and when I first saw Denise Richards in this, in particular in this shot, I was like,
Wow.
At that moment I realized that there was more to life than Lego and Dragon Ball Z. It's also good to see more and more Bond fans coming out defending her in recent years. I think Denise Richards understood just as well as we do that there are very little nuclear physicists walking around in tight shorts named Christmas, but decided to just play it with a wink to the audience and just have fun with it. In other words, she wasn't convincing as a nuclear physicist, but she embraced the idea of being a Bond girl. So, joy to the world for that.
Is that a Christmas joke?
For me? No. Never.
Get in.
What?
Get in.
Camille had a unique position in the Bond series, being a Bond girl starring in a sequel to Casino Royale, when Bond was still bent over Vesper's death. This meant that she would be the only main Bond girl Bond doesn't sleep with. They just share an intimate kiss in the end and depart ways. I guess it's appropriate given that both her and Bond go on their own emotional journeys during the film, and given this, sex seems inappropriate. Bond does have himself some strawberry though, but that's beside the point. I did always feel Olga Kurylenko had the potential to be among the greats of all the Bond girls, and I blame the writer's strike during Quantum's production for this. If you've seen my in-depth review on this film, you'll know I'm not a fan of the film. I think her emotional journey of losing her parents and seeing her mother get abused by General Medrano does not hit home well enough. Much like the rest of the film, that whole plot element just feels moot and numb. It's a shame. When you see her in Johnny English Strikes Again, in a more fun, traditional Bond girl-esque role, you can see the potential. I think she was a brilliant choice to be a Bond girl, but not really get to showcase that more flamboyant side she portrayed in that film. Essentially, she's like another Melina Havelock on her personal revenge mission to avenge her parents, and I just wish we saw that fleshed out more or saw her utilized in a more engaging way. She's a great actress. Still, I do believe she deserves this spot in the middle of the ranking, but absolutely could have been higher had it not been for the film she was in.
What are you doing here? Looking for shells?
No, I'm just looking.
Probably another controversial pick for this ranking, as he's usually seen near the top of people's lists. But most reasons he usually reaches the top in rankings of others is just because of two reasons. Because he was the first Bond girl and therefore the most iconic one, and because he's an absolute bombshell. While I do agree that being iconic and having the looks counts for a lot, truly, when you just look at her role of Honey Rider outside of being the first Bond girl, it is quite a simple character. All we really got from her is that she was self-taught, lives in nature, and Dr. No killed her parents. But none of that really played any role in the rest of the film. She could have stated any background in that scene and it wouldn't have influenced the film. I thought her character was a bit more interesting with the broken nose and such in the book. However, there is that entrance on the beach that is likely just the most iconic Bond girl moment in the entire series, and it's just done so innocently yet sexy at the same time. Especially for the early 60s. They were breaking all sorts of new ground with it. It is homaged so much in media or spoofs and even in the series itself by Halle Berry. So yes, she is easily the most iconic Bond girl out of all of them. But as a whole, for me, she fits neatly in the middle.
So, what sharp little eyes you've got.
Wait till you get to my teeth.
The domino of Thunderball in some ways was quite similar to Honey Rider. Both featured in a tropical setting, both mostly seen in swimming wear, and both being voiced by Nikki van der Ziel. But I felt Domino had slightly more character going for her. For one, she is a kept woman of the main villain, and she is unaware that his organization is responsible for her brother's death. Bond needs to win her over in order to find the nukes and save the world. I also felt she had good chemistry with Connery. Her character had potential to be better though. Her killing of Largo in the end called for more emotion, or at least a reaction to all of that she's been going through. And finding out about her brother's death did have some emotion to it, but could have been a lot more fleshed out and meaningful in the film. Which again is why this is among the Bond girls falling in the middle for me. By the way, did you know she designed all of her bikinis and bathing suits herself? I truly think she wears the best looking bikinis in all of Bond. Women could be wearing it today, over 60 years later, and I don't believe they would look out of style. And the same could be applied to her. To me, she had timeless beauty.
I wondered when you might arrive.
Slowly we're making our way to more fleshed out characters in the ranking. Maud Adams had the unique privilege of returning in her role after The Man with the Golden Gun, but this time as the leading lady. Out of all of Roger's Bond girls, I always felt she fitted the best with him. I also liked her backstory. At first, it almost seems like she is some sort of female Blofeld, pulling the ropes, causing a lot of intrigue, especially with the title of the film being named after her. Of course, she doesn't turn out to be the main villain, but is more of a separate entity, being the leader of an exclusive group of women sharing a sisterhood. She's in the gray area, not being evil, but not riding the waves of good either, being involved in smuggling. It's not until people's lives are in danger near the end of the film that she shows that she has a moral compass and helps Bond in the end. Octopussy was a very unique Bond girl in the series, and Maud Adams succeeded in playing a strong female leader as well as having a vulnerable side, making her one of the more three-dimensional characters in the series.
Black Queen on the Red King, Miss
Solitaire.
Speaking of unique Bond girls, here we had a tarot card reader able to predict the future with psychic powers. She's one of the more mysterious and alluring Bond girls, and probably the only one where the films played with a supernatural side, or, well, at least a suggested supernatural side. Unlike the book, in the film they made it so that her powers would disappear as soon as she lost her virginity. Which is ironic because in my experience it's usually the other way around. My girlfriends seem to have gained visions of my future after the first act. It gave unique dimensions to Solitaire though. Jane Seymour was a very young and inexperienced actress at the time, and she held her own extremely well. I also love the extravagant costumes surrounding her fortune teller persona. She brought innocence, intrigue and beauty to her part. She was also a captive in the villain's camp again, that seemed to have aided Bond early on. I think there's also a fantasy element surrounding her. I mean, a mystical virgin that turns into a nympho as soon as Bond slept with her.
It's the time before we leave for lesson number 3.
Absolutely. There's no sense in going off half-cocked.
You're one of the most beautiful girls I've ever seen.
Thank you. But I think my mouth is too big.
No, it's the right size.
I consider From Russia with Love to be among the best books Fleming ever put to paper. It is a super intriguing and thrilling read, and you can hear me talk more in depth about it in my corresponding Reading 007 episode on it. But I felt in the film they managed to translate a lot of that. Tatiana Romanova played an integral part of the villain's plot, used as a pawn and paired up with Bond, on which neither characters were given a choice. Yet, both got genuinely attracted to each other when their fates were put together. That first meeting of them was one of the most erotic yet romantic moments in the books, and I feel the film really succeeded in bringing that to the screen, with this scene often being used as one of the audition scenes for new Bond actors. Daniela Bianchi absolutely possessed an exotic nature needed to portray the character, and it truly helped to sell this electric moment of the film. I find her character very interesting, and I wish the deeper layers of her character were explored even more in the film. In the book, Bond would ponder what would happen to her when he would let her defect to the West and grew to have genuine feelings for her. Their love became genuine. It would have been amazing to see Tatiana struggle with these emotions more outside of that scene where she's crying in the train, because in the film that ended up feeling more melodramatic than it might have been intended. Because I honestly think she had the potential to be a top 5 Bond girl had they gone deeper. She certainly is in the books. I do like that in the film they made Tatiana the one to kill Rosa Klebb. Maybe they were inspired by the Thunderball novel and saw that Domino was the one to kill the villain, and they gave this twist to Tatiana in the film. Who knows? In any case, it was a powerful move. She's one of those Bond girls where you wondered, whatever happened to her after the film, having defected to the West for Bond?
My name is Pussy Galore.
I must be dreaming.
Much like Honey Rider and Tatiana Romanova, Pussy Galore is one of the most iconic Bond girl characters in all of Bond. But she's not just iconic. Honor Blackman was one of the early Bond girls, already breaking the stereotype before it even was a stereotype, portraying a strong female lead, being a pilot and the head of Pussy's flying circus, having a squadron of women working for her. She's also one of the many Bond girls who doesn't lean into Bond's advances immediately. In the book, she was even a lesbian, and in the film, this was more or less suggested with that one line.
You can turn off the charm. I'm immune.
I like that they left that more to the imagination of the viewer. What I also like about her performance is that despite Pussy rejecting Bond most of the time initially, there immediately is this playful flirtiness between them early on. She gives sneaky smiles when she rejects Bond. It's not like with Holly Goodhead, who seemed to be just plainly annoyed by Bond's advances, and then the eventual part where Bond does win her over feels more sudden and without any context. With Honor Blackman and Connery, the chemistry was immediately so evident, which, at least to me, makes the part where Bond does win her over not so surprising. Even if you think the scene hasn't aged well in the eyes of modern audiences. But I always encourage to view this scene within the context of the time this was made in. And I'm willing to bet that there was no intention to make this scene seem rapey or anything in that context. I view it more as a 1960s way of courting women. Today, audiences probably don't find this romantic, but I always say our grandparents likely beg to differ. And I don't need to point out the clear consent here. To me, there was always playfulness between these two. And besides all that, it was also essential to the plot. Bond winning her over meant that the lethal Delta 9 gas was to be switched by Pussy into an innocent one and helped alert the authorities to prevent Operation Grand Slam. All in all, to me, Pussy makes for an unforgettable Bond girl.
This is Triple X. Message received and understood.
Speaking of unforgettable Bond girls, arguably the most iconic out of the secret agent archetype Bond girls is Barbara Bach as Anya Omasova. To me, this was the first time in the series where they hit the female secret agent character nail in the head. The idea of Bond teaming up with a Russian agent at the height of the Cold War was very daring, and the fact that Bond turned out to be responsible for the killing of her boyfriend in the beginning of the film gave their dynamic an extra dimension.
When this mission is over, I will kill you.
It made the film incredibly fun. I used to say that Anya Omasova was the best out of the Bond girl secret agent characters, and I think I let the fact that she's so iconic partly make that judgment. I changed my mind on that throughout the years. Because she also has some wooden moments. Her facial expression is almost always the same neutral one throughout the entire film. And some fans also raised the argument that she's not really Bond's equal when she ends up being captured and all of a sudden wears that sexy dress, becoming eye candy in the end. But I never felt turning into a damsel at the end of the film took away from her strength. She still got that cool payoff at the end of the film. Despite some critiques, that fun dynamic of Bond teaming up with a Russian agent still makes me consider her as one of the top Bond girls.
Senor Montalongo?
Yes?
I'm Miss Kennedy.
Oh?
Mr. Bond's executive secretary.
For those who got the impression from this video that I dislike American actresses as Bond girls, I present to you Carrie Lowell as Pam Bouvier. I did state that American actresses as Bond girls so often lacked an exotic nature in the Bond girls they portrayed, but that is only if the character calls for being exotic. Pam is the no-nonsense, balls-to-the-wall type of Bond girl that fitted perfectly in License to Kill. Besides, Loopy fulfilled the exotic type of Bond girl in that film already. I think rarely does a woman look better with shorter hair, but Carrie Lowell is definitely an exception to the rule. She has great chemistry with Dalton and served an integral part of the story. She may not have been as iconic a character as Anya Omasova, but I certainly felt she was worthy of the secret agent equal to Bond type of Bond girls, showcasing she's all round as a secret agent, competent with guns, not taking any crap from men around her, able to pilot planes, but also able to use her charms to her advantage. I maintain that I find License to Kill to be one of the best written Bond films, with so many layers and sub-stories to it. Pam first views Bond as a competent partner, using him for sex probably as much as he would use her the other way around, but later struggling with jealousy towards Lupe, unsure what to make of her emotional connection towards Bond, makes her another one of these Bond girls that is more three-dimensional. And the payoff of Bond eventually choosing her over Lupe, and her falling for his heroism from the quest they've been on together, it all adds layers to her character. And before this ranking, I wasn't sure I was going to rank her this high, but I feel she truly deserves to be in the top 10.
Only a certain kind of woman wears a backless dress with a Beretta 70 strapped to her thigh.
One can never be too careful when handsome men in tuxedos carry walkthroughs.
The exception to the traditional main Bond girl that I was going to include within this ranking ranks within the top 10 for me. And that is for the simple fact that Béatrice Marlowe stole every scene she was in. It is a credit to the screenwriters for giving a character with this little screen time so much impact. To me, they succeeded in making the audience care about her backstory of being a victim of the Macau sex trade more than the writers of Quantum of Solace managed to do with the backstory of Camille, the film before. She falls into the line of intriguing female characters in the Craig era with little screen time. Much like Solange and Lucia Sciarra and Paloma. It is genuinely painful to see her exit the story as the sacrificial lamb, because I think all Bond fans agreed we wanted to see more of her. She had that air of mystery surrounding her, a gorgeous presence, yet you'd be on your toes, unsure of her cards that she's not revealing. And when Bond does manage to strip away the mask she's clearly holding up, we see a vulnerable and scared woman, portraying that fake confidence so well. A credit to Benary's performance. And the contrast it really shown when we see her later on, actually scared out of her mind for the villain. It is a real credit to the writing and her performance that they managed to convey all of that in the few scenes that she had. Definitely among the interesting Bond girls.
Can you go faster?
We don't need to go faster. We have all the time in the world.
Madeline Swan, the unique Bond girl to star as the leading lady in 2 consecutive Bond films. Had she just been the Bond girl of Spectre, she would not have ranked high for me. In fact, I called her average and could not figure out why Bond decided to give up MI6 and choose her at the end of the film. Being the daughter of Mr. White was an interesting concept and all, but in Spectre there was not really a lot that really made her stand out. Yet she was being presented as the new timeline's Tracy. And I was totally expecting her to return in Bond 25 to be killed off in the pre-title sequence, before we knew anything about the next film. What we eventually got from her in No Time to Die was a much more deeper understanding of her character, a flashback to her childhood, and a deeper look at the traumas she already mentioned in Spectre. But to me, the reason for ranking her this high is because Léa Seydoux and Daniel Craig managed to sell me on their love in No Time to Die. Their relationship was flawed, yet human. That breakup in the pre-title sequence is well done, and you can tell it breaks her heart when Bond puts her on that train coldly. With her grabbing her stomach knowing she's pregnant. That reunion in her old family home of Bond confessing his love won me over.
For what felt like 5 minutes of my life, I wanted everything with you. But I'm not going to leave here without you knowing that I have loved you, and I will love you, and I do not regret a single moment of my life that led me to you.
I'm not even the biggest fan of No Time to Die itself, but this was well done. She's also the only Bond girl for the cinematic Bonds to be the mother to Bond's child. I think it's a credit to Léa Seydoux to prove me wrong when she got so much more to do, going from just an average Bond girl to a meaningful one to me. I've been on record stating sometimes it would have made sense to bring back past Bond girls. Paula Ivanova should have been Anya Omosova. Paris Carver should have been Natalia. It potentially brings the essence of these characters to a higher level when we actually seen them in a previous film.
I don't expect you to understand. You're English. But I'm half Greek. And Greek women, like Electra, always avenged their loved ones.
For Your Eyes Only's Melina Havelock was another really interesting Bond girl to me. When her parents got killed before her eyes, Caroline Bouquet conveyed so much emotion through that intense stare of her blue eyes. That told us everything about her personal motivation that would drive her throughout the film. This is what Camille should have been to me. With her, We know what she's going through. We understand she's conflicted and fueled by emotion. At the same time, she's shown to be skilled with that crossbow, possessing a more reserved beauty, and she's very resourceful. She comes from a time when strong female characters weren't forced into films to meet a social expectation. She was just written this way because it made sense.
But we are only 5 men.
And 1 woman.
That's how you write a strong female character to me. And she does make sense. She stars in one of the most underrated Bond films, and I believe her to be an underrated Bond girl herself. To me, the down-to-earth approach they took here after Moonraker just clicked, and the same applies to her character.
Your eyes only, darling.
If I didn't know better, I'd say you were following me around, Mr. Bond.
You'll have to admit, though, we seem to have developed a certain attachment to each other.
Probably the Bond girl that went up in my list the most throughout the years. Out of all the equal to Bond secret agent sort of Bond girls, I feel Michelle Yeoh as Wei Lin truly tops the bill. And a large portion of that comes down of her being like a female Jackie Chan. You know she's actually skilled in real life and doing the fighting herself. As iconic as Anya Omasova is, and as high as I ranked her, I don't believe she could actually dangerously hurt someone with her bare hands. With Wei Lin, you know she could. She is as much part of the action as Bond is, sometimes completely outplaying him. And my god is she badass, wielding those guns, throwing that shuriken, and that scene of her and Brosnan handcuffed on that motorbike is such a memorable highlight to Tomorrow Never Dies. And I never saw anyone raise the point of her ending up in distress, much like they all do with Anya at the end of the film too, because again, it truly doesn't matter. Michelle Yeoh proved herself as a great actress portraying a competent secret agent. People complain that Brosnan and Wei Lin never had any romantic chemistry. I respectfully disagree. To me, that ending felt natural. There may not have been any feelings towards each other initially, as both were simply professionals, but there was always certainly at least hints and smiles of the pair liking each other. They expressed more than once enjoying working together, but people claiming it suddenly became romantic probably missed that romantic moment when Bond saved her life. Having survived the climax and prevented a potential world war on a dangerous mission together, I can only conclude that this felt like the natural follow-up to that. To me, she's absolutely worthy of being a top 5 Bond girl.
Ladies and gentlemen, the toast is the bride and bridegroom, Mr. and Mrs. James Bond.
One of the most important of all Bond girls, being the one that Bond marries and the one he loses at the end of the film. Tracy is arguably the best female character Fleming ever wrote for his novels, and they succeeded in translating that through Diana Rigg in Majesties. I still maintain I wish Connery starred alongside her instead of Lazenby, because sometimes their chemistry falls flat. Knowing Diana and George didn't always get along off screen, and with him not being an actor, she could have potentially been number 1 for me in a different chemistry. We will never know for sure if Connery would have fared any better with her, but with him being an actor, I'd like to think he would. Tracy starts off as the mysterious suicidal girl at the start of the film, one that manages to quickly engage us and Bond as we get to the casino scene. She is sexy, flawed, strong, yet emotional. This is what a three-dimensional Bond girl should be. Again, I just wish I was sold on their love more by Lazenby. That moment of her rescuing him when he was ready to give up is still very powerful, and his marriage proposal scene is great as well. For a guy that wasn't an actor, I think Lazenby truly did do his absolute best to sell it here. It's not hard to understand what Bond would see in her, willing to truly settle down now, making that ending that much more heartfelt. If only Diamonds was an actual follow-up to this, but yeah, that's a different story. She does get callbacks to her throughout the series though, rightfully being remembered as one of the important Bond girls, and a true breath of fresh air at the time. Here is to Mrs. Bond.
Knowing you only 2 days, and all I can think of is how we would be together.
Don't think. Just let it happen.
Speaking of breaths of fresh air, take a lungful of Kara. In my opinion, one of the most underrated Bond girls in the series. It is commonly accepted that the cinematic Bond falls in love in 3 instances, with Tracy, and then in the Craig era with Vesper and Madeline. I like to think that Bond certainly cares for a lot of the women he meets on his adventures, but he never quite falls in love with them in the same way. Though I like to think he got close with Kara. I think it helped that Dalton had a good understanding of Fleming's Bond. In the books, Bond would get emotionally attached to a lot of the women he meets all the time. And I think Mariam Dabo and Dalton really get that across in The Living Daylights. Mariam Dabo portrayed a level of innocence and naivety mixed up in an overarching plot that she's unaware of. She's just a regular woman who enjoys playing her cello. Seeing her amazed at Bond's gadget-laden car is the perfect example of this. She acts like any other mundane woman would in this situation, which makes her very believable. This is why I have little problems with her not being the most competent in that climax. She's not a secret agent, any normal person would panic. Her innocence is the strength of the character. Maybe it's the childlike enthusiasm in contrast to the more professional and level-headed Dalton that worked so well. Maybe it's those big brown eyes. Whatever she did, for me, her performance always resonated with me. She may not be the most iconic or important of all the Bond girls, but that chemistry was something else. Much like Tatiana Romanova, you wonder what happened to her after the film, because you saw Bond be intrigued by her and care for her, and see them go from strangers to being mixed up in a crazy adventure together to slowly care deeply for each other and, well, at least seemingly fall in love. To me, she just stands out, and I wish more Bond fans saw that too.
Tell me, are there any other standard operating procedures I should be aware of, Commander?
Thousands. But I only pay them lip service.
And speaking of Bond girls that just simply stand out, Natalia Semyonova is such a memorable addition to GoldenEye. To very similar reasons that I gave for Kara, another innocent civilian mixed up in a crazy plot. Also, not a secret agent. Very resourceful though, intelligent and gorgeous. Natalia is a great example of how to write an interesting Bond girl when it's not a secret agent or a Fleming character. But credit definitely goes to Isabella Scorupco for her performance. Out of all of Brosnan's leading ladies, she easily had the best playful chemistry with him. I really buy that Bond started to care for her. I brought up earlier in this video how she should have been the former flame Bond lost contact with instead of Paris. The two of them reuniting the film later would have been much more powerful because we know her. And so would Bond finding her murdered on that bed. But yes, that's not really for this video. What matters though is that in GoldenEye, she solidified herself as one of the best Bond girls the series had ever seen, at least for me. Her character arc was great, going from a regular computer programmer to suddenly see all of her co-workers and friends get murdered before her eyes, forced to hide, and then somehow surviving the facility burning and collapsing, going on her own journey to find out why this has happened. Running into Bond eventually, at first completely confused and enraged, later deciding to go on a journey together as soon as Bond rescues her. Somehow surviving this too, and walking out having fallen for each other, smiling in the end. I rarely came across Bond fans who can't appreciate Natalia Semyonova. We all know though that there is just one who tops it all.
I'm the money.
Every penny of it.
Yes, of course. How could I not? Unchanged from my original top 10 Bond girls video, Vesper Lynd simply tops it all. Maybe a cliche in every ranking video of Bond girls you come across on YouTube, but there is a reason for that. The first Bond girl Fleming ever put to paper, the one that made the most impact on Bond. Did you know that Fleming wrote her name as a pun on West Berlin? The reason for that is that, much like the city of Berlin, her loyalties are split in the middle. And in the movie they translated her to the modern day expertly, while still remaining faithful to the spirit of the original character. Eva Green had the responsibility of portraying one of the most important Bond girls to the screen. If the chemistry between her and Bond did not work, the movie would not have worked. Not only did she succeed, but she blew it out of the park. Straight from that introduction scene, she steals the show. And her and Craig immediately have such an interesting dynamic that evolves throughout the film. A playful disdain for each other at first, but as they go on and get more invested into the mission, they grow closer. Especially when danger arises and the once confident and cold Vesper turns vulnerable with that shower scene. The key moment, I think, when these characters start to grow closer. The most interesting thing of Vesper as a character is how she grows conflicted with her emotions. We all know she's blackmailed into working for a sinister organization against her will, but her love for Bond became genuine. And again, the chemistry can just not be underestimated, as they just simply captured lightning in a bottle selling that to us here. In no other Bond film released to this day can you see a deeper emotional connection between Bond and a Bond girl than in Casino Royale. As melodramatic as the "you stripped my armor" line may sound, this is exactly what happened. Bond is disarmed by this intelligent beauty that just hits him different. The cold mask is off and he's willing to give it all up for her. Seeing his heart be broken at first, realizing Vesper is in cahoots with shadowy figures, that moment of Bond turning stoic again, putting his emotions aside, almost ready to straight up kill her, tells us a lot about Bond. But then the suicide. Bond realizing her love was genuine, Vesper seeing no other way out than to end her life. It's one of the most powerful climaxes we ever saw, and to me, it tops the sad ending of Tracy. That is because Craig and Eva Green's chemistry was better to me, allowing me to be more invested into their relationship. Much like with Tracy, I just wish that the follow-up was better. It wasn't until this tiny moment in No Time to Die, all these years later, that it truly hit me how important Vesper still is to Bond.
I miss you.
It's crazy how that little moment resonated more with me than the film that was supposed to be centered around this. Vesper is the special one, and I hope in the future with Amazon we can see a dynamic like this recaptured again one day. The bar is high though. For now, Vesper Lind is simply the most meaningful Bond girl we ever saw. And that concludes my remade, more extensive ranking of all the main Bond girls. I really hoped you enjoyed this video. Throughout the years, viewers have asked me numerous times how I would rank the Bond girls based on how attractive I find them. And it's probably a bit shallow to do a whole video on that, talking in depth simply about how hot every Bond girl is. But if you were to ask me to simply share the 6 that I find the most gorgeous woman to ever grace the role of a Bond girl, these would be my 6. There you go.
And you've had your 6.
Thanks a lot for watching this massive project. Stay tuned for much more content coming up. And if you are a big fan of my content, consider to take a look at my Patreon page. Fans that take the extra step in supporting the channel also get various rewards such as early access to my content, having their name be featured at the end of my videos, a Discord server and other things. See you guys in the next video.